Ed Sullivan became a household name across America, known for bringing smiles to millions every Sunday night. But behind his calm and polished image was a past full of deep sadness, tough lessons, and one shocking moment that almost ruined everything. In 1955, something unexpected happened. A young musician changed a song during a live performance on Sullivan's show. Ed got so angry that he used a racial slur in front of the crew. People standing nearby were stunned. The moment was intense, and things nearly turned physical. Staff had to separate the two men before it got worse. That young musician was banned from the show forever. No one spoke about it publicly for decades, but that night made a big mark on rock and roll history. Ed Sullivan's story began on September 28, 1901, in Harlem, New York. He was born a twin, but his brother Daniel died as a baby. That early loss stayed with Ed, leaving behind a quiet sadness that shaped much of his early life. His parents, Peter and Elizabeth, were Irish immigrants who faced many struggles. Out of their 8 children, only 5 survived. Death was something the family faced more than once, including the loss of Ed's baby sister when he was just 5 years old. After that tragedy, the family moved to Port Chester, a quieter town north of New York City, hoping for a fresh start. Still, the pain followed them. Ed, often called the miracle child, was surrounded by grief but found comfort in music. His family often sang around the piano, and those moments helped him feel safe and joyful, even in hard times. As a teenager, Ed threw himself into sports. He was a talented athlete, earning 12 athletic letters in high school and becoming the captain of the baseball team. Sports gave him confidence, discipline, and leadership experience. At just 17, when the U.S. entered World War I, he ran away to Chicago to try to enlist in the Navy. But he was underage and had no documents, so he was sent home. That failure pushed him in a new direction. Writing. Ed started writing sports columns while still in school and quickly found work after graduation. His first job paid just $1 per article, but he loved every second of it. He moved from one newspaper to another, facing many ups and downs. He even worked at the Associated Press, one of the most respected news outlets in the country. But between 1923 and 1927, Sullivan's journey was filled with setbacks. Several of the newspapers he worked for closed down, forcing him to constantly search for new work. Despite the uncertainty, Ed never gave up. Each job gave him more experience and helped him meet the right people. He learned how to cover more than just sports. He tackled serious news stories and built a solid reputation as a writer. Growing up around different cultures and playing on sports teams with black athletes also shaped his views on equality. This later influenced his television career, where he gave many black performers a chance to shine when other shows wouldn't. The hardships of Ed's early life, from family loss to career struggles, gave him strength and purpose. They made him tougher, more determined, and deeply committed to fairness and excellence. All of those experiences, both painful and uplifting, helped shape the man who would one day become a legendary figure in American entertainment. Even while jumping from job to job, Ed Sullivan proved he was reliable and could always tell a strong story. His hard work and ability to adapt helped him build a solid reputation. By the time he left the Associated Press, people saw him as a skilled and trustworthy reporter. In 1927, he made another big move by joining the New York Evening Graphic as a sports writer. The Graphic was a bold and flashy paper known for dramatic and sometimes scandalous stories. Sullivan quickly fit in and was soon promoted to sports editor. This role gave him more stability and responsibility. While working there, he met Walter Winchell, a well-known gossip columnist. When Winchell left in 1929 for the Daily Mirror, Sullivan took over his Broadway column. That job introduced him to the world of show business and gave him influence beyond sports. When the Graphic shut down in 1932, Sullivan had already made a name for himself. That same year, he became the Broadway columnist for the New York Daily News. This is where he began writing his famous column Little Old New York. For 42 years, until 1974, readers followed the column daily. He wrote about Broadway plays, movie stars, and behind-the-scenes drama. His writing was sharp, fair, and full of insider knowledge. A mention in his column could launch a new star overnight. The column was printed in newspapers outside New York, making his voice known across the country. Sullivan also had a great eye for talent. His column was more than just gossip. It was a spotlight for up-and-coming performers. A few kind words from him could change a life, while a negative comment could damage a career. Producers and actors read his column every morning, knowing it could affect the future of their shows. He wasn't just reporting on entertainment. He was helping shape it. Outside his newspaper work, Sullivan was a regular at glamorous New York nightclubs. He spent most of his time at El Morocco, a famous spot that became his base. Meanwhile, his rival Walter Winchell held court at the nearby Stork Club. Both clubs were filled with movie stars, politicians, and famous figures, and each columnist competed to be seen and heard. Their rivalry became part of the city's social scene. Being noticed at one of these clubs could make or break someone's public image. Sullivan didn't stop with newspapers. He also wanted to succeed on the radio. In 1932, he launched The Ed Sullivan Show on CBS Radio. It was followed by Ed Sullivan Variety in 1941, Ed Sullivan Entertains from 1943 to 1944, and Ed Sullivan's Pipelines in 1946. These shows brought his voice into more homes, with guests like Jack Benny and George M. Cohan. He became even more recognizable and trusted. His radio success proved he could do more than just write. In 1948, CBS took a big chance and hired Sullivan to host a Sunday night variety show called Toast of the Town. Sullivan had never done television before, and many doubted he could succeed. But CBS producer Marlo Lewis believed in his calm and steady style. Sullivan himself joked that he'd already done everything they were planning. The first show aired on June 20, 1948, with a very small budget. Even famous guests like Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis were only paid $200. At first, critics hated Sullivan. They said he was stiff, awkward, and lacked personality. One critic, Harriet Van Horn, wrote that he had no charm at all. Sullivan took the criticism personally and once sent her a harsh letter. But audiences at home didn't care. They loved him. Even comedian Alan King joked that Sullivan did nothing, but did it better than anyone. Sullivan learned to accept the jokes and even let comedians make fun of him. That made him more likable. People connected with his honesty and his ability to laugh at himself. Over time, his unusual style became part of the show's charm. On screen, Sullivan often looked uncomfortable. His shoulders were hunched, and his voice was flat and nasal. Some even wondered if he had a medical condition. But there was nothing physically wrong with him. He just had a unique presence, and viewers appreciated it. His awkward smile and movements became part of what made him iconic. Comedians loved copying him, and fans admired him for being real. By 1953, the show had moved into a beautiful old theater in New York, originally built in 1927. It had a high Gothic ceiling and stained glass windows. It took a lot of work to turn it into a modern TV studio, including blocking out noise from the nearby subway. Sullivan loved the theater. In 1967, CBS renamed it the Ed Sullivan Theater to honor his long career. Today, the theater is still famous, used by hosts like David Letterman and Stephen Colbert, but it will always be known for Ed Sullivan. For a while, people still called the program Toast of the Town, but Sullivan wanted more credit. On September 25, 1955, CBS officially changed the name to The Ed Sullivan Show. That mattered to him. It showed that the network recognized his importance. A year later, he invited Elvis Presley to perform, and 60 million people tuned in. That moment helped make Elvis a superstar and confirmed Sullivan's place as a powerful figure in American entertainment. But not everything behind the scenes was perfect. On November 20, 1955, Bo Diddley was invited to perform. Sullivan told him to sing 16 Tons, a popular song at the time. But Diddley saw cards on stage listing both that song and his own hit, Bo Diddley, so he assumed he was meant to sing both. On live TV, he chose to perform his own song. The crowd loved it. His rhythm and energy were electric, and for many Americans, it was their first time hearing that style of music. Sullivan was furious. After the performance, he reportedly yelled at Diddley and used a racial slur. He called him, "the first black boy to ever double-cross me." That comment shocked people. Sullivan had supported black performers before, but this moment showed a different, uglier side of him. The two men almost got into a physical fight. Diddley's manager had to calm him down. Sullivan banned him from the show and told him he'd never appear on TV again. Diddley didn't care. He had already made history. Later, Ed's daughter Betty revealed that her father often had a bad temper. In public, he appeared calm and kind, but at home, he was quick to anger. She remembered times when small disagreements turned into loud arguments and slammed doors. Family members learned to be careful around him. Behind his friendly TV image was a man who could be very difficult in private. People may have seen him as a cheerful host on Sunday nights, but those closest to him knew there was much more behind the smile. Ed Sullivan left a huge mark on television and American culture, but his story was full of struggles, both public and private. Ed Sullivan was very different in private than he was on TV. While he looked outgoing and friendly on camera, in real life he was quiet and liked being alone. After his show aired, instead of spending time with guests or celebrating, he would often stay by himself in his dressing room. Even at home, he would read the newspaper or watch TV in silence for hours. This wasn't something temporary. It was just how he was. Some people who worked with him thought he was cold or distant because of this. During the Cold War, he also had moments of paranoia. His daughter Betty once shared a story where Ed became convinced that her boyfriend might be a communist. At the time, America was very afraid of communists, and Ed got overly suspicious. He questioned Betty about the boy and even considered banning him from the house. He also asked others for advice, even though there was no real reason to be worried. This showed how even someone like Ed, who had supported civil rights and allowed black performers on his show, could be affected by the fear and confusion of that era. Ed also struggled with showing emotion. His grandson, Rob Precht, said Ed didn't talk about his feelings or show affection often. Rob believed Ed was like this because of the pain he experienced growing up. Ed had a twin brother who died when they were babies and a sister who passed away young. Those early losses made him hold back his emotions. As a result, even family members sometimes found him distant or hard to understand. But deep down, he cared deeply. He just didn't know how to express it. This conflict between his public and private self also showed up in how he dealt with performers. One major example happened on September 17, 1967, when the rock band The Doors came to perform on his show. The producers asked them to change the lyrics to their song Light My Fire, because they thought the word higher sounded like it encouraged drug use. The band agreed to the change during rehearsal, but when the show went live, Jim Morrison sang the original line anyway. The crowd loved it, but backstage Ed was furious. He went to their dressing room yelling and accused them of breaking their promise. He banned them from ever coming back. When someone told Morrison they'd never be invited again, he calmly replied, "But we just did." That moment has become legendary in rock history. Another similar situation happened with the Rolling Stones. They were supposed to perform Let's Spend the Night Together in January 1967. CBS producers thought the song title was too suggestive and told the band to change the lyrics. The Stones agreed and sang Let's Spend Some Time Together instead. But Mick Jagger protested in his own way. Each time he sang the changed lyric, he rolled his eyes at the camera. Viewers noticed, and it became a quiet but clear act of rebellion. The producers saw it too. It wasn't as direct as what the Doors did, but it still made a big statement. Even before that, Ed had a conflict with comedian Jackie Mason. On October 19, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson interrupted the show for a live message, which cut Mason's act short. When the show returned, Sullivan held up 2 fingers off camera to signal that Mason had 2 minutes left. Mason started joking about fingers, pointing around the room and saying, "A finger for you and a finger for you." From Sullivan's angle, it looked like Mason gave him the middle finger. Sullivan was furious and cancelled Mason's contract for 6 more appearances, which was worth $45,000 at the time, equal to over $450,000 today. Sullivan told the media Mason was unstable and inappropriate. Mason denied ever making the gesture, but most people didn't believe him. He tried to sue Sullivan for lying, but he lost the case. The incident made headlines across the country. These moments show the complex and often intense world behind Ed Sullivan's polished television show. On screen, he was calm and steady. Off screen, he could be emotional, private, and difficult. Still, his influence was huge, and many artists who are now legends got their first big break on his show. His legacy is a mix of entertainment history, personal struggle, and cultural change. Jackie Mason's career suffered a huge setback after his fight with Ed Sullivan. At the time, Sullivan had a lot of power in the entertainment industry. Going against him often meant losing opportunities. After their disagreement, Mason was banned from most television shows. Even when Sullivan apologized later and allowed him back on his show, the damage was already done. People still saw Mason as the comedian who caused trouble on live TV. Many producers thought he was too risky to invite. For nearly 20 years, Mason had to perform in small clubs and take minor roles just to keep working. He slowly rebuilt his career, but the memory of the incident with Sullivan always followed him. It showed just how dangerous it was to get on Sullivan's bad side. He wasn't just a TV host. He controlled who got on screen and who didn't. That kind of influence could make or break someone's career. Sullivan also had very strict rules for performers. Even famous stars had to follow them. When Elvis Presley was on the show, Sullivan made sure the cameras only filmed him from the waist up to avoid showing his dance moves. Sullivan often made the final call on what was acceptable for television. But he also surprised many people by supporting black performers at a time when racism was common. As early as 1948, he began giving African American artists a national platform. He welcomed singers, dancers, and musicians from the black community onto his show. When some sponsors asked him to stop, he refused. One time, a Ford executive told him to stop booking black acts. Sullivan didn't just ignore him. He kicked the man out of the theater. Sullivan made it clear that talent mattered more than prejudice. Many legendary performers got their big break thanks to him. Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Sammy Davis Jr., The Supremes, The Temptations, and James Brown all appeared on his show. Even civil rights leaders like Coretta Scott King were given a voice on his stage. Sullivan took real risks by doing this, especially in a time when many people still supported segregation. Some people praised him for it, while others saw him as two-faced. Behind the scenes, Sullivan had a reputation for blacklisting people who upset him, like musician Bo Diddley. Still on camera, he helped promote black talent more than most TV hosts at the time. Sullivan's show ran for 23 years, from June 20, 1948, to June 6, 1971. In that time, more than 1,000 episodes aired. Every Sunday night, millions of Americans tuned in. He introduced the country to future stars like Elvis, the Beatles, and even comedians like Richard Pryor and Carol Burnett. When the Beatles performed for the first time on February 9, 1964, about 73 million people watched. That was a record at the time and a huge cultural moment. Sullivan stayed strict to the end. He made the Rolling Stones change their lyrics, just like he had with others. But for performers, being on his show could launch their careers. When CBS canceled the show in 1971, it felt like the end of an era. Sullivan didn't live much longer after that. His wife, Sylvia, died on March 16, 1973. They had been married since April 28, 1930, after meeting in 1926. Their relationship had faced challenges. She was Jewish and he was Catholic, so they kept it a secret at first. They even told her family that his name was Ed Sullivan. Eventually, they eloped and married at City Hall. 8 months later, they had their daughter Elizabeth. Sylvia was more than just a wife. She was also Ed's biggest supporter. She watched every episode of his show and gave him honest feedback. When she died, Sullivan was heartbroken. Only a year later, in 1974, Sullivan was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. His family didn't tell him how serious it was because they didn't want to upset him. Within weeks, he passed away on October 13, 1974, at the age of 73. His funeral was held at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Paul McCartney later shared that during their last meeting, Sullivan didn't even remember who he was. The illness had changed him that much. Years later, his daughter Betty and his grandson Rob talked openly about Sullivan's personality. Betty had married Bob Precht, the show's producer, back in 1952. She saw how deeply involved Ed was with every detail of the show. He was a perfectionist who wanted control over everything. Rob shared stories that showed both sides of his grandfather, the kind and generous man, and the strict, sometimes harsh one. Sullivan was known for his cold, serious manner on screen. But at home, he could be warm or suddenly angry. His family saw the full picture, not just the version that millions of Americans watched every Sunday. And long after his show ended, they still remembered how complicated and intense he truly was.